September 8, 1900. Galveston, Texas is the richest city in the state, and the man whose entire job is to warn it has told everyone a great hurricane here is impossible. He is about to be proven wrong in the worst way imaginable. That night, a wall of water 15 feet high rolls over an island that stands barely 8 feet above the sea. In a few hours of darkness, the whole city goes under. Houses are ripped apart and used as battering rams against the houses behind them. At a seaside orphanage, 10 nuns tie the children to their own bodies so they will not be separated. By morning, somewhere between 6,000 and 12,000 people are dead. It is still the deadliest disaster in American history. The forecaster's own pregnant wife is among the lost. And then this drowned city does something almost unbelievable. It lifts itself up out of the sea. I used AI to bring 1900 Galveston back exactly as it stood and as it drowned. Stay with me. Before that night, Galveston was the jewel of Texas. In 1900, it was the 4th largest city in the state and one of the richest places per person in the entire country. Its downtown, called the Strand, was known as the Wall Street of the Southwest. It was the first city in Texas with electric lights, with gas, with telephones. Wealthy families built grand homes along Broadway, shaded by oleander trees, which gave the place its nickname, the Oleander City. Vacationers crowded the beaches all summer, and almost nobody worried about one simple fact. The whole city sat on a flat sandbar in the Gulf of Mexico, and its highest point stood less than 9 feet above the waves. The man in charge of watching the weather was Isaac Cline. He ran the Galveston office of the U.S. Weather Bureau, and people trusted him completely. 9 years earlier, in 1891, Cline had written an article in the Galveston Daily News. In it, he declared that it would be impossible for a hurricane of any real strength to strike Galveston Island. Some residents had wanted to build a seawall to protect the city. Cline argued it was unnecessary. He called the very idea of a destructive storm here an absurd delusion. The city listened to him. No wall was built. Remember that article. In a few hours, it is going to cost Isaac Cline almost everything he loves. The storm had been spotted days earlier, moving over Cuba. But in 1900, there were no warnings from ships at sea, and Cuban forecasters who saw the danger were ignored. Washington predicted the storm would curve away to the east. Saturday morning began like any other workday. Warning flags went up over downtown, yet few people were alarmed. They had lived through high water before and called it just an overflow. Out on the beach, crowds actually gathered to watch the enormous waves rolling in. But Isaac Cline was uneasy. The swells were too long, and the tide was rising hours ahead of any storm. Something about it was wrong. Through the afternoon, the water kept climbing. It crept up the streets, then poured into them. By his own account, Cline drove a cart along the beach, shouting at people to get to higher ground. Some listened. Most did not. Then the bridges to the mainland collapsed, one after another, and the escape routes were gone. The island was sealed off. Children splashed in the flooded streets, treating it like a game, not understanding what was coming. The wind kept rising. At the Weather Bureau, the instrument measuring wind speed recorded gusts past 100 miles an hour, and then, at 15 minutes past 5, it tore loose and blew away. After that, no one could measure the wind at all. Around 6:30, it arrived. A storm surge, a moving wall of water nearly 16 feet high, swept in ahead of the hurricane's eye. The highest ground on the whole island was under 9 feet. In minutes, the entire city vanished beneath the sea in the dark. The houses closest to the beach went first. And here's the cruelest part. The surge lifted whole rows of wrecked houses and drove them inland like a battering ram, smashing them into the houses still standing, which then joined the wreckage and hit the next row. Slate roof tiles flew through the air like blades. Thousands of people clung to floating debris in pitch-black water, in screaming wind, with no idea if anyone else in the world was still alive. Isaac Cline's own house was one of the strongest in the Beach District, so around 50 terrified neighbors crowded inside it for shelter. It was not enough. The water rose to the second floor, the house lurched, and then it collapsed into the flood. 32 of the people inside died. Among them was Cline's wife, Cora, who was pregnant with their 4th child. Isaac and his brother Joseph managed to pull his 3 daughters onto a piece of floating wreckage. For hours they drifted through the dark, over the drowned city, dodging the broken houses around them. The man who had promised Galveston that this could never happen had just watched it take his wife. A few miles down the beach stood St. Mary's Orphanage. 93 children lived there, watched over by 10 nuns. As the water rose around the building, the nuns did the only thing they could think of. They took lengths of clothesline and tied the children to their own bodies so the little ones would not be swept away alone in the dark. When the surge took the building, it took almost all of them. 90 children and all 10 nuns drowned that night. Only 3 boys survived by grabbing a floating tree and holding on until morning. It is one of the saddest stories of the entire disaster, and almost nobody outside Texas remembers it. Sunday morning came up clear and beautiful, which made it worse. The water had pulled back, and it revealed a city that was simply gone. 2/3 of Galveston had been wiped off the map. More than 3,600 buildings were destroyed. Every single home that still stood was damaged. Survivors walked through a wasteland of splintered wood and mud, searching for anyone they knew. The numbers are still almost impossible to take in. Somewhere between 6,000 and 12,000 people had died in a single night, on an island of 38,000. Whole families had vanished without leaving a single person behind to remember them. Then came the problem no one was ready for. There were too many dead to bury. The ground was soaked, and graves filled with water as fast as they were dug. So the city tried loading bodies onto barges and dropping them far out in the Gulf. The sea simply pushed them back onto the beaches. In the end, there was only one grim option left. The dead were burned on pyres that smoked across the island for weeks. Soldiers patrolled under martial law, and looters were shot on sight. For a time, the survivors lived in a city of ash and grief, just trying to get through each day. Plenty of people said Galveston was finished, that the island should be abandoned to the sea. The people who lived there refused. Instead, they made a decision that sounds insane even now. They would fight the Gulf of Mexico directly. To get it done, they threw out the old, corruption-prone city government and invented a brand new system run by appointed commissioners, a model that cities all over America would later copy. Then they committed to two enormous engineering projects at the same time. Build a great wall to throw the sea back, and lift the entire city up out of reach of the water, both at once, by hand. The work took nearly a decade. First, the seawall, a curved concrete wall 17 feet tall and 3 miles long, designed to catch the waves and hurl them straight back at the Gulf. Then came the truly staggering part. They raised the whole city. Engineers jacked up more than 2,000 buildings on stilts, every house, every store, even a 3,000-ton church with its congregation still holding services inside while it hung in the air. Then they pumped wet sand underneath, foot by foot, until the ground itself was lifted. Some buildings rose a full 17 feet. It became one of the greatest engineering feats of the entire age. A city that the sea had drowned was physically lifting itself out of reach. The test came in 1915. Another hurricane, just as powerful as the one in 1900, struck Galveston head-on. This time the seawall held, the raised city stood, and only a handful of people died instead of thousands. The engineering had worked. But Galveston never got its crown back. While it spent years rebuilding, oil was found near Houston, and the shipping moved up the channel to the mainland. The richest city in Texas slowly became a quiet beach town, and Houston grew into the giant we know today. As for Isaac Cline, the man who once said it could never happen, spent the rest of his life studying hurricanes, helping to build the science that now warns millions of people before the water ever comes. The seawall he opposed still stands, holding back the Gulf. Next time a forecaster tells you a storm is coming, remember the night that warning did not exist. Thank you for walking through it with me. If this brought the city back to life for you, hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments which lost place I should rebuild next.